The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
And never mind the middle class. What middle class?
Right.
Yeah, the middle class is
Evaporated.
Yes. And this unearned money business, it's a really big part of my campaign, because the Gund Institute at UVM actually did some studies and started quantifying where all this unearned cash was coming from and where it was going, where it was flowing. So now we had some real
Capital
numbers.
gains, right? I mean, that's...
No, it's not capital gains. It's unearned gains from natural resource exploitation, from land speculation, from the stock market, and
right, all of that together.
and all of that unearned money flowing in one direction and untaxed. So the Vermont government actually doesn't have has a very narrow tax base, doesn't touch the money that's flowing out of Vermont, and now can't balance the budget, telling us we have to do with less.
Well, like, look at Alaska. You know, supposedly Alaska is a right-leaning political landscape, according to the perception. But every resident gets, what, $2,500 a year check as their share of the tax on the resources that are exported out of the state.
And no state income tax.
And no income tax, yeah. So, I mean, again, the right-left thing gets blown up. And that's what we have to do here. What should we do to sustain our local economies?
Well, economies, a lot of this is the fault of economists. The three of us studied economics. And what's the first thing that you learn in economics? That there's two factors of production, labor and capital, constantly to each other's throat. Labor on the socialist side and capital on the enterprising side. And then there's actually three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. If you look at the classics of economics, Adam Smith, Ricardo, which no economics student in his right mind ever reads or is taught, there's three factors of production. Land is not only physical land, but natural resources, all of the things that we didn't create, the atmosphere, the groundwater. If energy can poison the groundwater and pollute the surface water or use the surface water for cooling of their reactor, they're drawing upon a third factor of production. And since they aren't paying for it, that's the free lunch.
Right.
Okay, if Vermont were to tax that free lunch, we would be able to pay for all the social programs, we would be able to pay for health care, we would be able to pay for public transport, all of the things that we need to be economically vibrant and actually independent. So,
of course, the argument against that would be, well, those companies will just leave the state and we'll lose all of our jobs. The irony I see is that those type of employers don't have a lot of manual jobs. They're heavily mechanized. They're not, it's not, that's just mass extraction. It's
mass extraction, it's not production.
No.
Okay, this water is taken out of the ground in Vermont.
Put in trucks and driven all over.
And why do they bother putting it in trucks and take it away to be bottled elsewhere? Because the bottling costs money. Now, if it were taxed, the price of extraction would go up, and they might not be so interested in doing business in Vermont anymore. And then there's 7 Vermont employees. Yeah, they'd be out of work, but we'd be able to extract it in hopefully a more sustainable manner, keep our resource. And if we don't, it's not the end of the world. The water doesn't go away. The land doesn't go away. A natural resource, if not extracted, stays there for tomorrow until we can decide what to do with it. So that's the third factor of production. Today it's called the commons.
Right.
We talked about the empire and the money that's being diverted to Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, all this started back in 2001 with the attack on the World Trade Center. How do we feel about 9/11? Is that still an open issue? Do we need a new investigation of what really happened there?
I mean, I don't think there's going to be any way to come to a conclusion as to what really happened or who really did it or what. To me, the question is, why are we at war? You know, it's obvious that Iraq was a false premise to go to war. There were no WMDs. We got rid of Saddam years ago. Why are we still there?
And he had nothing to do with 9/11
Right.
by their own admission.
By their own admission. You know, Afghanistan is even more of a stretch. I mean, how is it, you know, if you just look at the basic facts of what 9/11 entailed, this isn't a bunch of cave-dwelling fanatics that could pull this kind of thing off. So, okay, who really did it? Does it matter? No. What matters is that Afghanistan is a false premise. We're there on a false premise.
Well, I was actually there in New York City. I lost friends and colleagues, and but for the fates of chance, I might have been in those buildings myself. So, I personally don't think it really matters who did it. What matters is what the government did after it,
Right.
which is totally unforgivable.
Right.
They used it as an opportunity to put into place every totalitarian dream that ever came out of the darkest mind in Washington, D.C. They started at least 2 wars. They increased U.S. military presence worldwide.
The Constitution is a history document, not an active document.
Yes.
You know, we've lost our rule of law.
So the actual crime, and it was terrible what happened. So whether it were an inside job, a false flag operation, as some people are saying and say they have evidence, and some of it looks compelling, you know, no matter who did it or who was on the grassy knoll, or I'm mixing up my conspiracies, but no matter who did it, that part of it isn't important anymore. It was a long time ago. What's important is how we dealt with it, what we did with it, and I think what we did with it is one of the most shameful things in the histories of this empire.
You know, even beyond that, assume that everything is as we were told. But go read about what's going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. What we're doing is not working. You know, if we were really out there to try to, you know, get rid of the bad guys and, you know, get rid of these terrorists, then if we look at what we're actually doing, we're creating thousands of new terrorists every day by all of these, you know, insane military operations. You know, we're creating more enemies every day at a huge cost. You know, the strategy does not work. So, you know, bottom line, our military policies, they're not working. We need to stop it. You know, we need to shut those 1,000 bases down, like Ron Paul is saying, bring those people home, stop wasting $1 trillion a year, and focus on protecting our own land. You know, if we're so worried about being invaded, then why is it so easy to walk across the Canadian border in any number of places in the woods? You know, it's obviously not an issue to me, the fact that, you know, all these terrorists out there. I mean, I just watched I love this show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. It's such a mind trip to go into this, you know, what's this whole global war on terror maybe look like from the inside, and it's such a menacing threat, and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. I don't see it. I think the whole thing is a big construction of another American myth.
Yeah. The real terrorists, I think, are the people in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Whether they planned and directed the attack on the Trade Center to create an excuse, like Hitler did on the Reichstag,
Right.
They have created a terror empire here with what they've done in Afghanistan afterwards and Iraq. So I would like to see a new investigation of 9/11, an international investigation. But even without that, my last show was with Charlotte Dennett. She has written a recent book about prosecuting Bush and Cheney and his administration for murder, based not on 9/11, but on the follow-on, sending Vermont troops to Iraq,
Right.
based on a false claim that they had weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't have. And I think if I get into the Senate, I will push to have a prosecution. Charlotte has pointed out that an attorney general in any state can initiate a prosecution against Bush and Cheney. And imagine, Bush is now, he's left the presidency, he's down there in Texas, he's living on this big ranch, all these millions of dollars he and his family has.
All solar powered and geothermal powered.
And he has the money in Texas, he has this big compound in Maine, and now he can use all this money to influence future elections and to send his children to Yale and Harvard, whereas we can't go there, we can't afford to go there.
Right.
I think no matter how long ago it was, we have to pursue a prosecution, and he should be brought to justice.
Yeah.